Play Your Role is a proud affiliate of Only Crits Dice. Check the link in the description for beautiful hard-edged dice sets as well as a coupon code in order to be able to get 15% off your next order. If you want amazing high-quality tabletop products as well as to support the channel, please go ahead and check it out. Enjoy the video. There you go. So in going through my comments, I saw a lot of interesting discussions recently. A lot of them have to do with the balance of the game, specifically when talking about when different players play different types of characters. You know, what if one player is playing a character who's min-maxed, and another player is playing a character who's optimized, and another player is playing one who is very clearly under-leveled or under-powerful from the rest. And it really got me thinking, because one thing kept popping up a lot, and that was talking about when different characters have different levels. There's a level disparity. And most recently, you could see this sort of concept in Critical Role, specifically Critical Role Campaign 3. For a small portion of time, they had a character who was much higher level than everybody else. And that was interesting to think about. But I think there's more to go into the topic on that, because Critical Role is a table of experienced actors who are first and foremost making sure to make an interesting story. So let's talk about that. So level disparity, what is that? Essentially, it's where a different character has a different level than everybody else, usually higher. And this is an interesting topic to go into because it is sort of a unique issue for D&D 5th edition. You see, most groups, at least from my specific point of view, I haven't gone and taken a poll or seen any data saying this, but from what I can tell, most groups these days follow on a milestone experience level. What that means is they will level up certain players together when they hit certain milestones in an adventure. And I think mostly this is because of, well, the starter kit. If you buy the D&D 5th edition starter kit, which is where a lot of people have started recently because it is much easier to pick up, you have the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure. And if you go through it, it actually talks about specifically doing milestone. Now it does offer an experience system, but it really puts the milestone system first and foremost in front of you. In fact, you can even go through it, and many times it will say you should level up your players at this point. So milestone has become really popular, and it's easy to understand why. In D&D 5th edition's attempt to make things easier, simpler, more accessible, doing the complicated math around experience is a chore. Not to mention the fact that experience can be really hard to wrap your brain around. I mean, think about it. When you go from 0 to level 1, it takes a certain amount of experience. From 1 to 2, it takes a certain amount of experience. But when you go from 2 to 3, it takes even more experience. It is a constantly multiplying amount, and that can be really difficult for a lot of players, especially when it puts a lot of pressure on the DM, because you can put it on your players to remember how much experience points they get. However, once they get those experience points, you have no way of really confirming that that's actually how much they got unless you go back and do the math yourself, causing you to have to put a lot of trust in your players, which is difficult if you're playing with new players. And then you take it to the fact that you have to trust your players and you have to go ahead and do the math for that yourself. But what if your players circumvent an adventure or an encounter? What if they don't go across that giant baddie who's supposed to give them lots of experience points? But what if they keep skipping and sneaking past different encounters that they were supposed to fight, and when they get to the big bad of the dungeon, they are far under level because they did not get as much experience as they're supposed to, and they're supposed to be stronger at this point. See, it causes a lot of issues, and while it is perfectly workable and some groups really prefer experience, which I understand, I'm not going to blame you for, but it does make it very clear of why people choose to do milestone. And so because milestone has become such a core part of D&D 5th edition because it's simply simpler, it leads to this question of what do you do when you have characters of different levels? Because in past editions, or if you're using just the base experience points, you could have people who go through an encounter and get more experience because somebody else was not at that encounter. They were at the inn, or they didn't join that day. Or some people do sessions where certain people will be there for certain sessions, and if you're not there, you don't get experience. Okay, so it leads to a level disparity. And how do you handle a level disparity story-wise? Because it can be very easy for somebody who is higher level to make everybody else get outshined. And you don't want that. You want everybody to feel like they're having a part in the story. And so I'm going to talk about this in two different ways. One, how to handle it from a story perspective, and one, how to handle it from a mechanics perspective. Because there are different types of tables who will care about different things. And we'll start with the mechanics. I am not good at mechanics. I will put that first and foremost up there. I'm not great at it. Recently, I started a Patreon where I give out homebrew stuff, and frankly, I don't make a lot of the homebrew. I give creative input on it, I take a look at it, but Micah is the one who actually takes care of it. He's one of the people we've brought on, and he's my brother, and he's very good at this. But he is much better at the mechanics than I am. So why do I think it's okay for me to talk about the mechanics of this with the caveat that I'm not great at it? Well, because for this specifically, you don't have to be really good at mechanics. You just have to be really good at battlefield awareness. The only thing that higher level characters tend to overshine everybody else in is in combat. Yes, you can get higher level as a wizard or a caster and get more and more incredible spells that you can use outside of combat, but let's be honest, those spells will typically help your party and help the others feel more useful. Yes, you may have gotten access to stone shape and you're now able to create an archway through something that lets everybody go through, but that just helps the party. But in combat, there's a distinct difference because it's much easier easier to feel like you're overshadowing the rest of your party. So how do you handle that? Well, one, pull the player who is higher level aside. I don't care how you're doing it. If they got higher level because they just happen to get a ton more experience, if they got higher level because it's part of the story, I really don't care. Pull that player aside and talk to them. Explain to them that they will be stronger and ask them to pull their punches. I know that sounds a little bit weird to ask your player to not try so hard, but there's a lot of benefits to having somebody who's much stronger but pulling their punches. One, it adds security. You don't have to worry so much as a DM about harming your party because you know that somebody can step in and start fighting harder. But two, it really adds the sense of realism. In a fight, you're not going to go all out all the time. It's just the truth. If you're an adventuring party who knows that you're going to have to fight multiple people a day, you're not going to go all out. If you know you're stronger, you will hold things back. Conserve your strength and stamina. And so it makes a lot of sense for the higher level player to sort of take a step back, pull their punches, and even better, use their higher level to be able to combat other combatants and give it a benefit to the rest of the players. Allow them to buff the rest of the players, or allow them to make sure that what they're doing is going to benefit them. Say you're a higher level fighter. Yes, go take on the big baddie, but tank the blows and make it clear that you need their help to help you take them on. A higher level character is most useful and most interesting when they are relying on the rest of the party. Yes, they are more skilled, but they understand they're not a one-man show. You have to make sure they're not a one-man show. But mechanics aside, what about the storyline? Why would you have, story-wise, somebody who is a higher level? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. You could have a mentor character. You could have a benefactor of the party. Critical Role sort of did this. Or, and this is my favorite one, you can have somebody who genuinely doesn't have the ability to use all of their skills. See, when you have somebody who is higher level, but they don't have the ability to access that higher level stuff for story reasons, it can be pretty fun. Maybe they have a mental block, they have trauma, and they can't necessarily do all that, and so they have to have other people around. Or maybe they have challenged themselves. They're a sort of anime-like character who refuses to use those higher level abilities because they want to train themselves to be able to not have to rely on them. Or three, maybe they're dying. Every time they use these higher level abilities, it's sucking a little bit out of them. There's a lot of story reasons you can find, but the main thing you want to focus on when it comes to the story reasons is figuring out what makes it not trivial. What makes it make sense that you have a higher level person who is not using everything they have. Don't make it just sort of a hand-wavy thing, because that really does draw the tension out of a story. If I have a wizard who can cast Fireball, but they're not casting Fireball because, I don't know, I don't want to make the rest of the players at the table upset, that doesn't make the players feel better. It just makes them feel pandered to. Find a good story reason of why it is. I personally really do like to rely on either they have a mental block or using those abilities harms them. I once had an NPC who was much higher level than the party, but he relied on them quite a bit because he was cursed with every time he cast higher level magic, it took a year off his life. So he was unable to use those things. And when he did use them, it was a dramatic story reason. Now that was an NPC, but you could easily do that with a player character. So try and work with that and work with the player who is higher level and make sure the rest of the table is okay with it. Make sure they understand why story-wise you're doing it or why mechanics-wise. Explain your reasoning. One of the most important things you could do as a DM is make sure that when there's a disagreement with your players and you to explain where you're coming from. In life, this is generally helpful too, but being able to tell people where you're coming from instead of just how you're choosing to do it can be extremely helpful. Now there are some DMs who will say that it is breaking immersion to do this, but I disagree. I think it is far more important that your table have cohesion and understanding where a decision is made. And even if they disagree with you, if you can come to an ultimate conclusion, that is where you need to go. So if you can do all that, you should be able to have a pretty entertaining game at your table. So go out into the world, make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play your role. A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. I'd also like to take an additional very personal thank you to BKBW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Malkadil, I hope I pronounced that right, Sassy Cat Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Tin Eye, and Void Mystic. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.